Good afternoon. It's Dr. B. It's almost 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I'm not going to be in town this next couple of days. My wife is going to uh, spend all my money at the slot machines, and I will stand there and watch her. And then invariably, the woman wins. It's kind of scary, as if she has some kind of magic touch for that, which I don't have. So that's why I stand there and I watch her. Enough of that. So this will be a relatively brief video. I was still playing around with that syllabus. I don't want to have too many introductory remarks, but I was playing around with the syllabus, and I am really, I think I already told you, starting to believe I need to stretch the syllabus a bit, slow down before we speed up. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time on this needs assessment. If I were to change an assignment now, which I won't do to you, that would make people crazy. If I were to change an assignment, I would probably have you rough draft a needs assessment in a narration form to me to tell me what you're thinking in terms of developing a plan for your implementation of a change program in an ENL school. But we're not going to. I don't want to make anyone nuts about that. But probably, let me put it to you this way: if any of you are thinking about that assignment, which is the very last assignment, the big assignment in the course, feel free to send me what you're thinking. Just send me an email, and I'll be happy to respond, give you some feedback. Yes, I know I've not responded to all my discussion questions. As soon as we hang up here, that's where I'm heading next. So I'll be starting to make that move today and over the weekend. Well, I'm not sure if I can do it over the weekend, but I'm going to try. So at any rate, so if you're thinking about beginning your topic, your plan for the end of the semester, which I think you should be thinking about, certainly not doing, but certainly thinking about. We've spent 2 or 3 weeks now on needs assessing. I'm going to spend one more session on it now. Curiously enough, I think if I remember correctly, the chapter 5 in the Collective Mindset book kind of lays some seeds down for that as well. So hopefully they're all meshing together. I'll also, by way of housekeeping, remind you, by the way, everyone got the survey to me. And so there was a little bit of confusion because I guess a lot of people have married themselves to the syllabus and haven't taken as much time looking at the modules and the videos. As I said a couple of times, that's a mistake. As I told you from the beginning, I have a habit of switching up on syllabi and counting on the modules to keep you and the discussion questions and the announcements to keep you abreast of where we're heading with the course. So I would say that you got to do both. If anything, actually, I would recommend that you pay more attention to the modules and the announcements and the discussion questions. I try to tie them all together, and more often than not, they are. Okay, so enough said about that. You did, everyone caught up to me on the Futures Quotient survey. I'm reading that with great curiosity. I'm smiling because I have to decide which roles I want to put you in. 2 kinds of roles, ROLES roles, and I have to decide how to handle that. But I have a pretty good idea that who will either my superintendent or my board president is going to be. But after that, I'm a little shaky. Not shaky, but I still haven't really figured all of that out. So enough said, not to worry. That's on me. And I'll probably do a separate video on that after I've processed the surveys a little more closely. Sometime next week, I suppose, mid next week. Enough said. So what I'm going to do is just spend, as I said, not a whole lot of time on things that you think that you know. You think that you know, things that I think I know that sometimes get lost in the shuffle. And I'll just prelude that conversation by pointing out, at least for me and my own long experience in these kinds of things, in my own long kinds of experience in traveling through the halls of many a school in my day, I think that the more experienced people are, the more they think they know, which is not always the case, because what they do is they leap to conclusions. They've been around the block. They don't have to go through the mental list. They can just go, bingo, that's what you need to do. I've seen this 100 times, and that's what you need to do. Many times when someone has a serious illness, They may go to a local doctor, and the doctor may say, you do 1, 2, 3, 4, and some of it sounds a little out of whack with you. And you say, I think I'll get a second opinion. Most of you live in the metropolitan area and in the city, so you know that most of the time, not always, the really superior doctors are in the city most of the time because they're experienced. They've seen every hangnail there is to have and how to treat it. And that's what happens in school systems too. And the old guard, have seen everything or think that they have. And if they haven't, they will pretend that they have seen it because, after all, younger people often, not always, thankfully, defer to the old so-and-sos for their expertise, their experience, more than necessarily their expertise. So with all those things being said, I'm going to give you a list of things to think about ways, strategies that you can use to gather information. None of them are foreign to you, not at all. Okay, but I just want to put them all out there. Now, if that would together with the two or three other PowerPoints I've done about needs assessing, you should be able to begin to cobble together. This is how I'm going to approach this. And the last prelude I'm going to give you is the phrase I've used with you several times, and I don't know where I got it from. It's not an original phrase, and that would be the needs assessment is designed to find out, to affirm what you know, confirm what you know, figure out what you don't know, and somehow discover what it is that you don't know that you don't know. And that's where we're heading here, because you think you know what's going on in your school system. You think I'm making this up, that the general ed faculty has a mindset about the E&L faculty, for positive or for negative, probably not neutral, and you think you know what that is, but maybe you don't. And maybe they don't either. And the only way you can find that out is by really doing a need assessment. On the other hand, you may want to take a look at, and these are all things that are pretty obvious. You may want to take a look at quantitative information, a survey, something like I just gave you folks, which, by the way, is not the greatest survey. It's just intended to gather your perceptions, hoping that they make sense to you, some of which may not, which is also understandable. You may want to figure out what kids are saying. What are they saying about what's going on and what's not saying? What the parents are saying? Because you don't always know what they're thinking so well. You only know what the lab people say. You don't know what everybody's necessarily thinking. And those will have to go into the pot to be boiled off, to be distilled to the bottom of that pot where the real, true essence of something really is. And that's what gathering information is about. You shouldn't go forward with an implementation of a change plan without doing a thorough across the spectrum needs assessment. Much as you want to do everything tomorrow, as I often am like, that's almost always the wrong thing, unless it's the Titanic. And if the Titanic is sinking, you haven't got time to do much of a needs assessment. Somebody says to the captain, "We've hit an iceberg and we're going to drown." And the doctor, and how much time does he have to think about it? He basically says, women and children in the lifeboats, and off they go. He hasn't got time to make a full-fledged, 360-degree analysis of what this is about. But for the most part, more often than not, you're going to have time as a leader to do the 360 audit, I call it sometimes. There'll be times when you don't, in which case you have to, you use the information at your disposal, try to find some other things out, and then you move forward. But when you have the luxury of time, and clearly this is a make-believe exercise, then you have the time to figure out what the 360 should be. And keep all those things in the back of your mind as we move forward to, and this is kind of tied to the discussion question, if I recall correctly. I'm not going to have time to post this PowerPoint this weekend. So you have to pay a little extra attention to the video or rewind the video if you have to. I'm going to start rather than doing any more preludes than I have already done. Okay, so this is a sample list of information scanning strategies. That word scanning is interesting too. Keep that in the back of your mind when we come back to decision making. At any rate, that's what we're going to call them, scanning activities. Some of these are going to be required. I'm going to put a little star next to these. Hey, how do you do a star on here? I don't know how you do that. I'll figure it out later. If I highlight it, maybe that would be helpful. These I want you to include in the needs assessment. These I want you to include in the groups in the needs assessment you're going to offer me. Generally speaking, what I'm going to ask you to do is to pick two of the others. But I want you to be familiar with them all. So two in addition to the yellows. Two in addition to the yellows. All right, so keep these in the back of your mind. So there are study groups, focus groups, are a little bit different. Expert consultation, panel discussions, field trips. And the first futuring forecasting strategy I'm going to talk about for a few minutes, trend extrapolation, which is a fancy word for reading a graph. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Study groups, focus groups, experts, panels, field trips, trend extrapolation, and then the other two, which you must do, but you're not going to do those today. You're just going to keep them in the back of your brain. Okay, and here we go. So just to get a little bit of a better handle on what they are. Study groups are what they sound like. What you do is you're going to consider a change, and what you do is you bring people together. Right? And what you're going to do is say, hey, brainstorm, which is a word that's so abused, overused, misunderstood. Like I can do a whole course on that one word. I'm not being a wise guy when I say that. Where you get some groups together to say, well, what do you think you see happening here in small groups? And do me a favor. I see people thinking about parents not being happy. I see people thinking about students not being happy. I see someone worrying about the academic performance. I see someone talking about the resource issues. And you say, okay, I'm going to put you in smaller groups just for you to do some more research for me on that. That's all it really is. It's a valuable tool, obviously, as long as you don't leave an idea out. If you come up with all these fancy dancy ideas, but you didn't really look at the resource issue, for example, clearly the resource issue is going to have an impact on any decisions you're going to make later. So that's something that you don't know. So that's what a study group is about. Focus groups is different. All right. In this case, you're going to bring in cross sections of people, or you can do mixtures of people too. I always find it, forget the big word, a homogeneous grouping to be a little bit more productive. But because the heterogeneous meaning, that is, they have a mixed set of people there, the representation sometimes can get imbalanced, and you don't get all of what you need to hear about a given point of view, or perspective. So you can invite community members, organization members to be interviewed in a group, okay, and see what they're thinking about. And then you ask them, and then what you do is you kind of bring them together to synthesize that. Or you bring in experts. Now, the best one I can always think of is a demographer. Demographers know a lot of things. Demographers are the closest thing we could equate to futurists. Although that's probably overstating it, but demographers know, how many subgroups live in your community, who they are, where they're from, what their basic income is, single parent families, full families, economic, and they know a lot of things. All right. And that's a great, and there's always one or two, by the way. If you go to the regional agencies, especially in your cases, the Board of Education, there's plenty of people there with calculators doing these kinds of computations for you. And what you want to do is bring them in and have them literally speak to your groups. Okay? Or you may want to bring an economist in. Talk about the economic issues that apparently color what your thinking is about how you're going to create this change. A civic group has their fingers on the pulse of the community's needs and the perceptions of what's going on. It's a little off topic. I may have told you this before, but I was talking to a principal in my doctoral classes a couple of years ago who was a principal in a very poor district in the South Bronx. And they had plenty of openings, every teacher openings. And what they were requiring was if somebody kind of came through the interview process and there was a couple of finalists, they would require that the people and the candidates would stay, I'm not sure if it was a week or a day, might have been a week, at a community's, with a community family, live there for a week. See what that community is about, what those people are enduring or not enduring, who they are, and what's going on with their own conditions and needs. And some, as the principal said, some people didn't make it for 2 days. Some got through the whole week with great experiences. And if you didn't complete the time period, you didn't get the job. Because what you're looking at for experts who have experienced the issues that your students are experiencing. So I think it's a great idea. I don't know how practical it is all along, but I do like the idea very much. So an expert group would be people come in and say, "Yeah, I lived in the Smith's house apartment for the last weekend. 3 nights a week we ate. I don't know, we spread out the food that we had. It wasn't a lot of food for everybody, and I was the next member of that." That's kind of thing. And people listen to that and take that as part of what they need to factor into their decision making. Panels is a little different. Now a panel, and you could have one of those experts or several of them sit at a panel where everyone have their presentation about what they think is happening and what people need to know, what they don't know that they don't know. And then you move them over to where they compare and where they don't compare. All right. So they're going to give you data. They're not going to give you any old thing that pops out of their heads. They may have charts and graphs, who knows, those kinds of things. And then what you're going to do is let them work that through. And then what you should always do too, although it's not on this slide. Remember, I'm not going to put these slides up for some time. Is what you want to do is to enable the audience to ask questions. Always have the audience ask questions. That's where the real fun begins, when you really begin to see an engagement and an exchange. That's part of what this is, what the change process on whole with the W is about. Field trips. I just mentioned a field trip. I didn't realize it until I said it, but if you go live in a community member's family home for a week, that's a field trip. All right. Visits to the local hospitals, visits to other places in the community that you might feel that people need to have some experience with. You can do it virtually too nowadays, and you go from there. Always debrief it. Tell me, okay, you went to the Smiths family for the War Week. Tell us about what you experienced, and let people ask the questions. That's a valuable activity. Very few people do it, but it is something I want to put that up on the list. Now, remember, these next two ones I'm going to talk about are required. Oh, I'm sorry, not this next one. This next one we're going to just talk about. The two after that we're going to talk about. We're going to require. So let me stop that conversation, go to the next place. This is interesting to me because, for me as well as for you folks. I said earlier that a trend extrapolation is a fancy word for reading graphs, especially line graphs. Trends going this way, the trend's going that way, the trend went backward, the trends went down, up, and in between. The yellow line went this way, but the red line went that way. Good graphic descriptions of how the data seems to be arranging itself quantitatively, although the why behind it, the qualitative piece, which is like what a focus group does. Focus groups do quantitative things are not part of that, at least only for a minute before you get underneath it. And so reading knowing what trends seem to be is very valuable. Now hear me on this, because I had trouble remembering this myself, up to a point, and then they become dangerous. Mark Twain, wrote Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, lots of other books. I may be butchering his quote, but basically he said something like, there's lies, damn lies, and there's damn statistics. I may have that a little bit mixed up, but because if people start looking at statistics, even on a graph, which is pretty straightforward, or a line trend graph, they're pretty straightforward. Even on them, they mask things sometimes, or they don't anticipate the next. You always remember that a trend graph, take a look at my arrow here. A trend graph only takes you from the past to today, this moment. It doesn't go to the future necessarily. Something could happen as I finish this sentence that changes the line of the graph. Unforeseen things, for example. I mean, I hate to talk about these. I get off on a tangent real quick on this. Is the trend graph on pre-COVID was we were always going to have people ill, and absenteeism in schools was always going to be an issue, in some schools more than others. But in the end, this is how it looks. It's basically what it's been. For heaven's sakes, the futurists and the edu-futurists, of which there are precious few. Hopefully you're looking at one of them. I'm not sure I have the right to call myself that, but I would like to call myself that. The edu-futurists completely missed it. Never foresaw the possibility of an epidemic coming out of China, and then where it came from and where, well, that's another conversation. It killed 1 million people in the United States. The graph trend line changed. And that's why I always say be careful. So if you say, well we have the trend line shows that we're going from 22% Central American children in my building, and if it continues that way, we'll be going to 43% in the next 2 years. That's what the trend indicates, but doesn't guarantee. It indicates. Well, that says to you as leader, and as well as your think tank group that's doing this kind of thinking with you, is that there's a probability that the trend will stay the way it is, or drop, whichever way. The trend will say which way the direction is taking you. However, it might not, because we need to prepare for the might nots as well as for the mights. So it's great for past and present, okay? It's useful for speculation about future, but not perfect. And so you really need to be careful to elicit the kind of thinking that you need about whether, in fact, these data guarantee the future direction. What could change? Here's an example. And I'm not advocating for this. I do not advocate for this. I'm just pointing it out. I know that the city is having a real tough time, and a lot of Long Island districts too, or metropolitan districts are. And the influx of students and children from other countries is really becoming pretty hard to handle if it hasn't already. It probably has already exceeded our ability to handle it, our capacity to handle it, because we didn't future for it is another side note on that. But in the end, what we're talking about here is that we need to consider what we would do if these things go this way versus if these things go that way. All right, so let me go back up to the top before I go forward again. Okay, we did study groups, focus groups. Okay, we got to take this. Give me a second. I'm sorry. Grandson going. Sometimes he needs grandpa. I pause this. If I can. And I can't. Pausing for a second. Okay, sorry about that. Let me go back to sharing the screen. As I said before, pick two of any of these. You're going to pick them all. That's okay, fine with me. But pick two. And then the SWOT analysis and the root cause identification. I will teach you another day. I'm not going to do that now because suddenly I have to go pick my grandson up. So I'll stop it there, knowing that you know that you need to do those two activities. I'll show you how to do those. Probably not today, probably early next week. Because these are really critical. They're in the collective mindset book, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But for the moment now, that'll be what we need to do for today. And I'll come back to you maybe today, but I kind of doubt it. And if not, maybe late Sunday or Sunday night, probably around, I don't even know what time. I can't guess, but I'll try to get this done before the end of so on Monday morning. You're not going to be wasting your whole weekend waiting for me to send you the rest of the slides, I hope. Okay, with that said, I'm going to sign off. And if you have any questions, email me or text me. But this week I am going to be occupied. But if you need me, I'll respond somehow.